record. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming back to lesson 2. I sufficiently did not bore you enough with the lesson 1, so I'll try harder this time. So before we begin, I want to cover 2 things I either missed or that I would like to rephrase from our last session. First, what we missed, and that is consonantal diphthongs. So they are diphthongs that come with 2 consonants. Greek has some of these, just like English does. And for our purposes here, I just want you to be aware, there's 4 of them, but I want you to be aware of one that shows up regularly. For our pronunciation system, the Erasmian, it makes the same sound. So when you see them, just recognize that. And they are as follows. They are gamma, 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 kappa, gamma, xi, and gamma, chi. And this makes the NG sound. Our word for angel comes from the Greek word for angel. However, the Greek word is spelt. You like that? You like that? You like that? Except the Greek is spelt and that's not pronounced angelos, it's pronounced angelos. So that was the one thing we missed from last class. I'll leave that up there. So what I'd like to say next is to rephrase or just say something a bit differently. Remember I had told you that you cannot learn Greek in 6 weeks. Well, you can learn New Testament Greek in 6 weeks. However, you cannot said to have learned New Testament Greek in less than 10 years of study. Both of those statements are true. And I bring this up because I want you to come away with, what I want you to come away with by bringing this up is that I want you to apply yourself to the material that's presented to you, and I want you to strive for even more. You're going to be surprised at what you can accomplish when certain self-presumed limitations are laid aside or ignored. So does that make sense for everybody? Did I clarify things pretty well? Okay. So I'm also going to do one more thing that I didn't do last class that I humbly regret, and I'm going to open us up with a word of prayer. So, dear Heavenly Father, thank you for our time together. Thank you for these wonderful saints who are here who want to attempt to delve more into Scripture, and Lord willing, they will succeed mightily. Give me grace and wisdom to help teach them, and I want to thank you for your undeserved wisdom to us, that we can actually have access to the Scriptures in its original language. Thank you for your Son and all he has done for us on the cross. In his name, amen. So, lesson 2. What? Throughout the 6-week class, we will be focusing on 6 words to guide us, if you remember. Last week was why. And we asked the question, why learn Greek? This week is what? As in, what are the most prominent and important foundations of Greek grammar? So, nouns. On your handout there you have nouns. I have written a noun is part of the sentence that performs the action, has the action performed upon it, or establishes relationship between other nouns. Every language has what we call parts of speech. Greek is no different. Nouns are commonly referred to as a person, a place, or a thing. It's not inaccurate, but a better way to explain a noun is exactly what's there on your handout. At least I feel that way. Just look at John 1:1 for instance. So if you turn your handout to page 3, you'll have on there John 1:1 through 5. That first sentence is John 1. John 1:1. There are 6 nouns there. One tells you where or when something is happening. 3 tell you who is doing something, and the last 2 tell you what or who has something being done to them. Another important foundation of the Greek language is the article. English has 3 articles. Does anybody know what those articles are? Oh, right, because I have it written on there. Oh! Whereas Greek only has 1 article. Though it comes in a whole bunch of different clothes. I have the clothes right there. For all things the English article does, the Greek does as well. And there are certain things the Greek article does that the English article could never even dream of doing. I have some examples there of the English article. A car is blue, the car is blue, an elephant is gray, and the elephant is white. Could anybody tell me what the difference is between what's called the indefinite article there and the definite article in those little sentences? Anyone?
Well, like the blue car, I mean, a blue car is not specific. I mean, it's just a car is blue, but the is talking about a specific car.
It's about specificity. So, an elephant is gray. Tons of elephants are gray. But the elephant is white. A particular elephant is white. So, another element that is important to Greek are adjectives and adverbs. As a small side note, this is just an introduction. I'm just letting you know what these prominent features are. We're not going to get into all these today. We have a specific idea of what we're going to do today. I hope with what I'm about to say, you're actually going to see a pattern unfolding. What do adjectives do in English? Anybody?
Describe a noun.
They describe a noun. I bet you can tell me exactly how they function in Greek. Tracy?
They describe a noun.
Oh my goodness! The main difference in Greek, however, is because it's being an inflected language. It's going to be a little different. Because of this, identifying an adjective is a little different in that if you can recognize a noun in Greek, you can recognize an adjective for the most part. And we'll cover that in a later lesson. If anyone would like to know why, I can explain that in a moment. So another foundational element of Greek are prepositions and conjunctions. And prepositions and conjunctions connect various words, phrases, and clauses. Prepositions are words that indicate relationships between other words in a sentence. So these are 2 parts of speech that are often very abused in Greek and abused by those attempting to take advantage of the unsuspecting. And this is a short excerpt from David Thatcher's book, Saving Our Prepositions, of why these often little words give people so much trouble and rife for abuse. I thought it was really good. I pulled it out from the awesome thing that is Google. So, quote, all words can be problematic, but prepositions are particularly so because their use and meaning often seem, and indeed often are, so arbitrary and peculiar. The word idiom derives from the Greek word for peculiar. We might say that the idiomatic preposition tends towards the figurative. The non-idiomatic preposition tends towards the literal, as in this well-known jingle. The bird is on the wing, but that's absurd. The wing is on the bird. We can sense the difference between the dog jumped at the man's throat and I jumped at the chance, or between she looked into a mirror and she looked into the problem. Familiar prepositions like after, by, for, of, and on can vary towards the figurative when found in phrases, the meaning of which cannot be determined by their constituent parts alone. Examples are not that far to seek. After all, meaning all things considered. By far, meaning to a great extent. For good, meaning permanently. Of course, meaning certainly. On edge, meaning nervous. The last one I want to quickly cover is verbs. Are verbs. The Greek verb system is much more complex than in English. It is the one place where much is different. There are many reasons for this, but rest assured, don't assume complex means difficult. The verb is the bedrock of Koine Greek, and since that is the case, it is wise to presume the difference it warrants. There are many more elements of grammar to Koine Greek, as there is in English, but for now, I do believe that is going to be enough. That's the introduction. So, any questions about our introduction before we get moving on to lesson proper? Marvelous. Okay. So, lesson 2, ankle deep. So again, I have on your printout there, John 1, 1 through 5. So as we progress, we're slowly going to learn a little bit more of it, a little bit more. Before we get into the lesson, I'm curious, how did anyone do the homework for last week? I don't need hands necessarily. Keep yourselves anonymous.
Thanks for saying that.
No problem, Kofi, no problem. So, and for those who did do the homework, I hope it went well for you. I heard Karen talking about it earlier, and writing some of the letters was a lot of fun. Except that stinking C. Or Xi, sorry. So, last week we just went over the main points of the Greek alphabet. And for homework, I asked you to write them and also go over some of the vocabulary words. This week we'll go beyond just dipping our toes in the water, and we're going to have to dry our feet off with a towel. We're going to learn 2 of the most important things to know in order to learn Greek and to utilize it for study. Besides verbs, which will come up in due course, nouns, or recognizing nouns, and the article, knowing how the article actually functions, will get you through more learning and studying Greek than just doing a basic word study. So, nouns. I'm going to be basically reading right off of the form. So in Greek, the grammatical terms we use for noun usages of the subject, object, and a possessive noun are a little bit different. We actually call these cases. Even in English grammars, you will find this language. And Greek has 5 cases, but in our time here, we're only going to cover 4. The 5th case comes up very, very seldom. It's for direct discourse. So, does anyone, as a small addition, does anyone know how you would identify a possessive noun in English? Gold star. So apostrophe S is one way you would identify a possessive noun in English. So keep that in the memory bank. So we're going to define all of the 4 cases we're going to cover. The 4 cases are nominative, genitive, dative, and accusative. So a nominative is what we would call a subject. They're the part of the sentence that performs an action. They are doing the verb that is in the sentence, a nominative case, nominative form. The accusative is what we would call objects, commonly a direct object, and that is, they are the ones that the action is being performed upon. So verb normally, if it's an active voice, we'll cover active voice in due course. They're actually, the verb is being acted upon them by the nominative, subject, direct object. So there you have on your handout a word, restrict. I want you to remember this word. This is the word restrict, and it is for the genitive case. So like I said before, a possessive noun, so as possession, I own this, whatnot. Daniel's coffee cup. This is mine. But what would be a more correct term in Greek is a word for restriction. The genitive case serves the purpose to restrict its head word, and that word is often the word directly preceding it. We will explain these all as we go on. The next word I want you to remember is the word relationship. This is not mother, daughter, father, son relationship. It's just any relationship you might say. So that's for the dative case. The dative case serves the purpose of expressing various relationships within a sentence. So the first thing we're going to cover is how to find a subject and an object. In English, as we said before, how to find a subject and object is word order. So on your handout there, you have two tiny little sentences. So Tom hit Bill. I'm going to write this for my own purpose. No Toms here? Awesome. Tom hit Bill. Period. So how do you know who's doing the verb, hit? Well, Tom is, because he's first in word order. That's how English works. And he's hitting Bill. So Tom hit Bill. But all we have to do is switch them around and say, Bill. No Bill's here? Okay. Bill hit Tom. Now the sentence is completely different. Bill is not the one being hit. Bill is the one doing the hitting. And Bill hit Tom now. So they're getting a very heated argument, apparently. So, subject, verb, object is how we find out who the subject and object is. In Greek, it's a little bit different. Word order is not necessary to find the subject and object. So on your handout there, you have 3 little sentences that say the same exact thing completely in a little, what we'd call Greeklish. So it says, Thomas hit Bill on. That sentence says, Tom hit Bill. We know that, not because of word order, even though it's the same word order as English, but because of that little color marking there. The blue is your nominative case, and the red is your accusative case. We know Tom is doing the hitting of Bill, not because he's a mean man, but because it is in the nominative. Then all of those ones below it say the same thing. Billon hit Thomas. That doesn't mean Bill hit Tom. That means Tom hit Bill because of that last little 2 letters appended to the end there. And Billon Thomas hit means the same thing. It means Tom hit Bill. All those mean the same because of what is the subject and what is the object. So, any questions there before we start to get a little further?
So just to clarify, you're saying that it's, in the Greek language, it's the verb endings that tell you who is doing or not necessarily word order.
The noun endings.
Noun endings.
The noun endings,
The
yes.
noun endings, yes.
They're the ones telling you who does it. Yes, Megan.
So, like, does word order, does word order ever matter? Is there a way, like, word order would affect the sentence at all? In what
There are
sense?
some effects. It
Is
would be
just, like, whatever
emphasis.
the author wants to do?
Emphasis would be something it would do.
Okay.
But for the most part, finding a subject and object just in a clause or a phrase, word order is not going to be important.
Okay.
It may bring you to a new subject and a new object and so forth, but it won't specifically tell you who is the actual object, who is the subject, what is the object subject.
Okay.
That's going to be these little endings here
Got it.
that I've written up on the board that you have in your handout later on. So just as a small bit of review of what we just done, the subject is what we call the nominative, and then in your handout there it says NS and NP. It stands for nominative singular, nominative plural, and so forth. So direct object is the accusative, accusative singular, accusative plural, ASAP. Possessive, sorry, even I make myself laugh. Possessive, sometimes it's an indirect object, is the genitive, so genitive singular, genitive plural, GS, GP. Indirect object, sometimes a direct object, is the dative, dative singular, dative plural, DS, DP. So on your handout, there's some examples of the Greek genitive. So this is this idea of possession. This is what we would call maybe a case of possession, possessive case. So 3 of them I have there, and a couple of them are actually words that are going to be in John 1, 1 through 5, or in your vocabulary that I'll assign. So biblios theou can mean one of 2 things, one of 3 things. It can mean book of God, book from God, or God's book. This is how the genitive works. And notice, as I said before, the genitive usually, it'll modify, it will restrict the head word, the word that comes before it. So biblios comes before theou. Therefore, biblios, which is the subject of this little brief sentence or phrase, has the omicron sigma, which means it's the subject. So it's not just any book, it's God's book. It's not a book about anything or from any place, it's the book from God. All of those are accurate, and the context is what's going to really bring it forward. Has anyone noticed, as a brief point of explanation, has anyone noticed in your Bible, off the little side when there's a little small letter that a lot of people can't read, that says, or in, or at, or from, or for? That's where that comes from. It's because this is the word that that's after it. And so they're just being honest. It could be any of these three, but it's not too important necessarily. So then you have logos theou, same thing, word of God or word from God or God's word. Huios anthropou, son of man or man's son. So any questions on the Greek genitive, at least identifying it? What about understanding it? We'll go a little more eventually. But.
So is the OU the genitive?
Omicron upsilon.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that good?
That is the genitive. That is the second declension genitive. And we will get to that very soon. So now I want to cover a little bit of the Greek dative. So that third one in the list, or I guess this would be the fourth one in the list. So it's the Greek dative. And now I actually have put John 1 right there on your handout. So enarchi, enarche, ein ha logos. Oh man, I learned the wrong pronunciation system. So that would be translated as the word was in the beginning. So the Greek dative, it's showing different relationships. So again, if you look at the little Greek there, on the left side, the Greek dative, you have the logos, ha, logos, is the subject because of the omicron sigma. And it is doing something in the sentence. The word right before it is a verb. We'll leave that off the side for the moment. It means he was, he, she, or it was, and he is something. So in this case, it's actually a direct object. And it's identifying it as a direct object that he is or was in the beginning. So that word means the beginning. And because it's dative, you actually don't need that little N there. It's a preposition. We'll get to that in a moment, in a couple weeks. But the N isn't necessary to tell you that he's in the beginning. It could do the same thing. Preposition gives a little more definite meaning to a word, as it does in English. And then the one below it gives the same word, but a little more nuance to it, because we actually have an accusative in this sentence. So utos, don't worry what that means right now. It means him or he. Utos ein en arche pros ton theon. So, before we go any further, can anyone identify the subject in this little sentence with what we've learned so far? Wrong answers are totally appreciated. First word? Correct. That is the subject. That means he.
And then the one after the red one.
And the one after the red one? That would be our direct object.
Okay.
Well, no, I know what you're saying. You're pros. So that's that's another preposition.
Okay.
So
is it the accent on top of it?
that actually would be something that would identify it.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So yeah.
All right.
But thanks for pointing that out. It can,
Not confused.
no, it's perfectly all right. So the direct object is ton theon. So utos is doing something or associated with ton theon in some way in this sentence. And we know this because utos has the subject marker, its final two letters, and ton theon, its final two letters tell us something as well. And those words in between are what's going to tell us. And we have that English translation there. He was in the beginning with God. Pros is a word that means with. So he's with God in the beginning, you could also say. So anarche is telling us how he and God are, what is the relationship between them. So they're both, he is what's getting this verb being done to it. He's the one who's in the beginning, but he's in the beginning with God. So that's their relationship. Any questions about the dative at this point in time before we move on? All right. Great. We're quiet today. So the next thing on our list is a declension. So this is going to be identifying it. And we'll do a little more with trying to figure it out, maybe read another sentence or two. So a declension is how we refer to different ways to change the ending of a word in Greek to show its function in a sentence, how it's being used. There are 3 declensions. We're only going to focus on the first 2, and those are the first and second declensions, very original names. So on your handout there, you have the declensions, or the first and second declension case endings, and I've written them on the board as well, if you don't want to stare down. So the first declension is this middle one, which we'll focus on for now, and it's what's known as it's what shows feminine gender mostly and masculine gender occasionally. I want to make a brief note on gender and sex in language. Gender is a grammatical usage. Sex is a biological thing. So words do not have sex, words have gender. The word for hand in Greek is chir, or chir, and it is feminine. Feminine. Even if it's a man's hand. Doesn't matter. Why? I don't know. I actually listened to a podcast from NPR today that covered this, and it was weird. Anyway, actually it was fascinating. But that word is feminine. The word logos is masculine, even if it's a woman's word. It doesn't matter. It's going to be masculine. It's just how you identify things and connect them together, and we'll get to that in a future course when we cover adjectives as well. So this is mostly always going to be feminine. Sometimes it's going to be masculine. Predominantly it's going to be feminine. And the nominative singular, the ending of the word. So you're going to have Greek has what's called morphemes. So it's each individual little part of a word. So if you use the word, we'll use one that was on our vocabulary. Oh, I'm sorry, Tom. Sorry, Bill. Goodbye. I will leave that one. So if you do the word for beginning, arche, this word means the beginning or beginning. And so what this is this is going to be its nominative singular case. So this is going to be its nominative singular case because this is its ending word. This is what's called, if you just go the beginning part of the word, this is what you would call, we'll just call it its base. This is the base part of the word, and anything you append to it, put onto the addition of it, is what's going to tell you what it's doing in a sentence. This is its base meaning, and this is its added element. So this would be arche, which means beginning, and this means it's the subject in a sentence. And so that would be this little top one, so it's nominative singular. The second section there, underneath the declension case endings, gives you some examples. And so there's some examples from the first declension there. The word for hour, writing, and glory. So just to be consistent here, I'll just write one of those on there. So we'll do hour. You pronounce that, hora. So this would be its subject way of recognizing it. Hora. Is that cute? Yes, it is. So hora. So that would be, if you'd use it in a sentence, it would be, the hour is now. That would how it would look. The hour is now. If you did the genitive form of it, which would be os, so this would be horas. Make that a little smaller. There we go. Horas. That would be God's hour is now. So the hour is identified. The hour is identified by God. So God would have the nominative form, but this would have its genitive form because it's restricting the hour to God. No, that would be wrong. Dang it. I'm trying to think of an example in my mind. We'll leave it for now. Ora, so the hour is going to be restricting something. I don't know how often this actually comes up in genitive. No, let's just leave it. I don't want to keep sitting here thinking. So the next one would be the dative in this one. So does everyone remember from last class about that little iota subscript that I kind of left off to the side? So with the iota subscript here is this is actually just an iota, but it's not at the end. A lot of times they don't put iotas at the end of a word. For some reason they do in places, but here they don't. For the life of me, I cannot recall at this moment why. Just know that they don't. Greek's funny. They're weird people. Anyway, so this would show relationship in the sentence. So in the hour appointed, so-and-so and so-and-so. So-and-so did all these things, but they did it in the hour appointed. So it's showing a relationship. They're doing this in a particular way, i.e. in the hour that it was appointed. The next one we do would be accusative. Oras. And this would be its subject form, or direct object form. This is almost always, this last one is always going to be a direct object. These may be utilized in that way depending on other factors, but this is always going to be a direct object, and this is going to be a subject. It may not be the only subject, but it's going to be the subject. And that would be an example of a first declension paradigm. And these will change. This is why I started with this one, because sometimes they use different letters. It's the same declension. It means all the same things, but they're spelled differently. And you have examples of that on the handout. So the word for write or writing is graphe, graphes, graphe, with a iota subscript, and graphein. So any questions before we move on one more time to that little asterisk one I've got up here before we move on? Yes, Cameron.
The accusative ends with the alpha sigma and not the
Knee.
alpha knee. Okay, so
Thank
I was
you, sir.
wondering.
Okay. Any better questions than that? That's a good one. So
I was worried for a second. I didn't know what was going on.
it's the first time I messed up, so we're not doing too bad. So anyone else? Any more questions? Okay. So these are all pretty standard as far as first and second declensions, or first declensions. But there's going to be some outliers, and I want you to be aware of them. And that is this little asterisk one, which is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th chart there of word constructions for the word glory. So the first declension is going to show up either in this form, or alpha, eta, eta, alpha is what you would normally call that. It won't show up in any others. It won't be alpha, eta, alpha, eta. It won't be that. It will be one of these three. One of these three. All etas, all alphas, or an eta sandwich with alpha bread. If that makes any sense to anybody. That makes sense? An eta sandwich? Alpha bread? Okay, I guess I'm not that funny. Okay. So to do the plural, actually that's my next point. So a declension does 4 things. It'll say 4 things about a noun. When we move on to the next one, we'll go further. It'll say its grammatical function, so subject, whether it's a subject, an object, or if it's restricting a noun, or it's showing relationship between nouns. So it does one of those 4 things. It will also show gender, whether it's a masculine, a feminine, or a neuter word. It will show person. How many is it talking about? Is it one or more than one? Wait, person. I wrote that wrong. That's verbs. Cameron, you're supposed to catch me on this.
No, that's fair.
Person. So it doesn't refer. Cross out person. And then it'll show number. Number is how many you're doing it. 1 or more. So that's singular or plural. Cameron,
I'm sorry.
you're supposed to catch me on
Obviously,
this.
too.
I know, but he's got lots on his mind. You're
Are you implying that I do not?
not really.
Ouch.
Okay, so it'll show three things. It'll show grammatical function, gender, and number. And so you sort of have this right here on this board. See, look, it's right here. Ugh. So this is grammatical function, nominative, genitive, dative, accusative. This is gender, masculine usually, feminine occasionally, feminine usually, masculine occasionally, and neuter. And this is going to be number, singular, plural. So does everyone recognize how that chart works? If you saw it down,
What's singular and plural?
singular and plural.
Where?
S&P.
where-
Singular plural, S and P, S and P. So
I just
Oh,
finally figured
okay.
it out.
there we go. Okay, so N, S. So this is our example. So change any letter you want here, and we'll do A, P. So the first one, this does function, and this one would be nominative. Ooh, man, can I write like that? Tiv. And this is person. Wait, number. And this is singular. No foolish questions in class, ever. They're always good questions. And this one, in this case, it would be accusative. And this is plural. Very easy, very easy, very easy. The more you see it, the more it'll just be, why was that ever hard?
Sure.
That's what I said. Don't get overwhelmed with it. It's not something that you need to be worried about. So, any more questions? It's a great question, Joe. Any more questions? So, what I want to do now is I want to go over the second declension. So the second declension is actually this side and this side. So this is the masculine normally, sometimes feminine, and always neuter section. Notice all of the similarities and the differences between each one. So one of the things you want to recognize are the differences and similarities between the singulars themselves, between the second declensions. So the first column after the NS, GS, so forth, and the third column after it. The genitives singular is the same in both, and so is the dative singular and the accusative singular. They're always the same, and it's great for memorization purposes. It can be difficult for recognition purposes. Oh no, is this a genitive neuter, or is it a genitive masculine, or a genitive feminine? What that's going to do is we'll get that when we get to the article. We'll help that section out. So that's why we have the article. It's why it's kind of a big topic. This is more along the lines of recognition, knowing how do I find it. They mostly function the same as in English, so that's going to be a really easy thing for a lot of us. A lot of us. I wasn't thinking of you, Ron. I was thinking of Cameron.
I'm just not feeling myself in the ring.
Why am I your punching bag?
Well, I mean, you noticed my mess up with the sigma and the new, but you couldn't call out Daniel. But person is verb. So anyway, it's fine. Anyway, so sorry. So the other thing I want you to recognize is something that's really, really important to recognize. What is a dative? A dative always has in the singular an iota subscript. In this case, it's always going to have an iota, and so you're always going to say, you'll see the little iota subscript, and you'll go, that's a dative. About 95% of the time, you're going to be correct, and I'm pretty confident about that. So that's something you want to recognize. Another one is the accusative always has a "ni" ending it. That's a very awesome thing to remember. So, yeah, I think that's all for the singulars. For the plurals, again, the same thing. You want to recognize what's similar between them before you go on. So the genitive, again, for memorization purposes, is great. It's the same all the way across the board. The dative has an iota in it, just like the dative up here. This is subscripted, and this is on the line itself. It's a good recognition tool. You see the little iota. It might look like a C. Maybe if I do that with him.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. My deepest apologies. So the iota for the dative, same as up here. And that would be kind of the main similarities among the plurals. And so then you want to notice the different plurals, the different similarities between second declensions, masculine and plural. The second declension, the genitive and the dative are the same, no matter what. So that's really easy. It's really helpful as far as memorization purposes. And even recognition. They're the same so you know how it's functioning. For the plurals, what I like to think of, for the neuter rather, is that same idea with the sandwich thing. So the second declension neuters has an oo sandwich with own bread, and the plural, Cameron, has an own is sandwich with a bread. Making fun of my memorization tools. So that would be that one. Any questions for the first and second declension before we move on to another realm of it? Anyone? Any questions? You have very wide eyes, Jody.
This is just a little shoot.
Yeah.
Because I don't break things down like this in English, so it's just. I'm still trying
It's
to get-
new, and it should be. You have to sit down and pay attention and go over it a couple times to get a new language, especially one that's completely different as far as structure than your own. So it makes a lot.
Okay.
It makes a lot of sense when you're trying to read through it and you ask
Little
questions
kids
of it.
can learn this language and not even understand this like us, right? You know?
Yeah.
So maybe.
Adults can as well. You can do this. I know you can.
Believe in yourself.
So I just want you to know how to identify a subject and how to identify objects. That's the primary purpose of these structures, how they're relating to each other. That's really what you need to focus on. That's why these are always the same, no matter the original word. So you can find out what the subject and object is, and you can open up a dictionary to find out the word. That's the easiest part. And once you know these, almost everything else in Greek stems from this. You'll be able to know how to find an adjective, what the adjective's modifying. All of these things come from knowing this little paradigm. But you don't even need to memorize it this time. This is just for you to look at and go, okay. When it comes up again, it'll be a lot easier to come through. So repetition is a really good key to learning things. As I'm sure we've all taught children this factor. What's your ABCs? No, say them again. Okay, yeah, say them again. Yes. So any questions before we move on to the article, which is kind of where I want to sit for a minute? Any questions? Anyone? No? Ethan, you're looking very confident back there. Yeah. Okay, so point 3, the article. So in English, articles are usually used to indicate definiteness, definiteness, specificity, as Ron said so wonderfully earlier. And they're what are called special adjectives. So they're modifying something, specifically a noun. In English has 2. It has the indefinite. Okay, I spelled that right. The indefinite, which is a and an, and the definite article, the. This is a brief explanation of the Greek article from Dr. Rodney Decker's Reading Koine Greek textbook. So Greek has only one article as opposed to English. The article functions differently in Greek than it does in English in that it can do more things than the English article can. A lot more. But what the English definite article does, the Greek article can do as well. So it can do the same and more. The Greek article is awesome. Super awesome. So, a few specifics. There's no such thing as a definite article in Greek. Zero. Is that understood from everyone? Okay. All right. As a small note, whenever you hear someone say, well, it's missing the definite article there, immediately go, I don't know if they know what their Greek very well. I've heard scholars say the definite article, so it slips out from time to time. Number 2, there is no specific word in Greek equivalent to our English a or an.
You just got rid of both of them then. I didn't get it.
There's no specific word equivalent to it. There is a word that can be used. It's the Greek word for one,
Oh, okay.
which makes a lot of sense when you say one person, a person, so on and so on.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
so Greek does not have an indefinite article. It has a word that can show indefiniteness, but it only has an article. It doesn't have a definite article, just an article,
Okay.
even though an is not. Anyway, in Greek, the article must agree with the noun it modifies in gender, number, and case. Always. If it does not, it means it's not modifying that particular word. So this is where a lot of the struggle of identifying and separating these things really comes into play.
So uppercase, lowercase, that's what you're talking about, what case?
Case is no. Case is first, second, and declension. This is a case.
Oh, like order. Oh, no.
Not necessarily. Case is what tells you its gender,
Yeah, it's like
number.
indication.
These are the cases.
Okay.
So it's going to match it precisely.
Okay.
So if, does it have it on there? Oh no, I should have added one on there. I can show it. So, oh, that was for next week. Anyway, so there on your sheet you have an example of the Greek article. So these are always appended to nouns or noun phrases. And they will always match the word it's modifying, and it will always come before it the word that it is governing. And so on your sheet there you have all of the articles. So they all mean the same thing. They don't mean anything different. They all come in, as I said, different clothes because they're supposed to match a different word. If you found this, I don't think do we need this up anymore? This little thingy?
Yeah.
Awesome. So if you found this in someone's Greek sentence they made, that's a little long. Someone who knows Greek would look at that and go, "You're either ignorant, fooling me, or I don't know, having fun," because this means the word is doing something. This means he, she, it is doing something. This means something completely different. Yeah. So it would have to be, since this word has this beginning, it's going to always have this one if it has this beginning, because it has to match it in its gender, number, and case. So this was a masculine word. This is a singular ending. So this has to be masculine and singular and nominative. So this is case. All of this is case. That's case. Masculine, nominative, and singular. Masculine, nominative, and singular. If you had a word, let's see. I should have brought my lexicon. Okay. Yeah, that one. So if you have this word, odos, which means hodos. That's a breathing word. This word means road or way. This actually gets a feminine article. Yeah. That would be one of those rare feminines there. So it's where you kind of need to know a little bit of vocabulary. This is very rare. It's very rare you're going to find something like this. So you don't have to be scared of it. It's very, very rare. When you see it, though, in a Greek text, you'll know they're not yanking your chain. They'll be correct. If someone else writes it out for you, you might want to question them. But in an actual Greek text, it's going to be fine. So it has to match it in all of those three things, and that will actually help you in a lot of different cases. So what I want you to notice now are the similarities and differences between these two things. So when it comes to the, I can't think of the word, it's called, these oblique cases is what it's called. The second half will match it exactly. And all it does is add a tau on the front end. And so you'll know what is article is going with what because of its ending. And this is how you'll know it's governing it, because these things are going to match it exactly. And there won't be any questions in your mind of what is this thing. You'll know it's the article, and then you'll know, it's going to match this, and so it'll match it will tell me what it's doing. Which is why, when you get to the neuters, again, these sandwiches, Cameron, these two-toe sandwiches with toe bread and tone teeth sandwiches with ta bread. They don't match they match up these in some fashion, but when you have these accusatives of the second declension that are confusing, you have these articles that are very distinct. And so that will help you out in trying to find out, well, which one is which? I don't know what. Then you see those and they help it. The main use of the Greek article is actually this, what we're talking about now. This is what its purpose is to show you its gender, its person, and its function in a sentence. They don't tell you the, a, or am. They're just site markers to say, well, is this my subject or my object? Joe, yeah.
It says here, it can do more things than the English article can, but what the English definite article does, the Greek article can do also. But then under specifics, it says there is no such thing as the definite article.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's no such thing as a definite article in Greek, how can the Greek article do what the English definite article does?
So it will do the same thing, but it is not described as a definite article. It can do and show definiteness. But
it seems to be like in scripture, understanding a big concept. It's often, is this the definite article or is it not?
Mm-hmm.
I remember reading that several times, and it sounds like there is no definite article. So the answer would always be no, it's not the definite article.
It depends. It's how it's being functioned, and it depends on which things are in a sentence. So if you go to page 2, so this will be a good talking point. So if you go to page 2 there and you look at the passage that we're going to be that we're going through over and over, that we're going to be going through, and our goal is to learn it. I have too many pages. If you look at that first sentence there, what is that? Page 3? Yeah, page 3. Sorry, page 3, piece of paper 2. Page 3, piece of paper 2. And you see there, you should be able to recognize some of the articles and some of the endings of words and be able to kind of work through it and go, oh, so this is going to show relationship somehow. This is actually my object. This is my subject, so forth. And you'll have different articles there. And the biggest one to recognize is the second theos, or in this case, the first theos, but that's beside the point. The second theos doesn't have an article. So this would be the argument that a Jehovah's Witness would bring to you. So because it doesn't have the article, that means it's just generic. It's any God whatsoever. The reason it doesn't have the article is because if it did, it would show a particular element that the author is trying not to give you. Because the article before it, the theos, the one that has before it is ton theon. So that is the God. But you wouldn't say the God, you'd say God. It's showing definiteness. It is definitely showing that. But the second one is not trying to show definiteness, like as if to say, to translate it, you'd say, and the word, he was God. What it's showing is a quality to it. That, whatever this first theos was, the second one is as well. There's a similarity to them, but there's still a distinctness. This is why a Jehovah's Witness, if you will, cannot respond to the Greek, because the author is going out of his way to use how Greek functions to tell you the word, whatever the first theos is, he's got that too, but they're not the same. They're different, but they're the same, but they're different, and that's why it's there. So the first article there with theos is giving it this definiteness aspect, but it's not called the definite article. That's why there's no such thing as a definite article in Greek. It doesn't have that definition to it. So does that answer your question, Joe?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So there we go. Any more questions before we try and just
So a noun
process
may or
it?
may not have an article.
It may or may not.
And not having an article means that it's non-specific.
It does not. In Greek, it does not mean it's non-specific.
Okay.
That's why there's no such thing as a definite article.
It just, but if the article is left out, what does that mean then?
It can mean various things, but for the most part, nothing too significant.
Depends on the context.
Yeah, it will depend on the context. By itself, it won't do too much. In that sentence, John is trying to get across a very difficult concept to understand, and he's using any tool he can in that sentence within the Greek language to get the point across. And the only people who don't like it are Jehovah's Witnesses. So, and some other scholars. But nonetheless, the article doesn't mean that it's just a generic God, or else you would say a God. But he's not trying to tell you that, because that's not how the article functions. The article primarily functions to tell you these three things: masculine, singular, and neuter, or feminine, singular, neuter, and so forth. Or what it's going to do is it's going to connect it to another idea within the sentence. So, does that make sense? Any clarifying points that you'd like? Any at all? I'm
The
at your disposal.
sigma has two different letters. The S-looking one is when it's the last letter of a word.
Yes. Fantastic. Yeah, any questions from last week too? I'd love to answer, because that's the end of the class proper. So this is open question, open discussion time. Yes, Cameron.
Why are there so many accents on the articles?
Why are there so many accents on the articles? That's how they came. I'm not even kidding.
You know,
I'm not even kidding.
do they matter?
They
You
do.
remove one jot or one tittle. And you will-
Yes, thank you, Joe. Thank you.
Be forever cursed.
They do matter. It's why I have actually. Thank you for bringing that up, Cameron. It's why I actually have that thing to the right. And my last little note before I do it: do not confuse the Greek article with the Greek relative pronoun. So this is why I have that there. So if you notice the feminine nominative singular Greek relative pronoun looks very similar to the feminine nominative singular Greek article. So many words.
So many words.
What?
So if you look on your handout, the sheet, so the little picture down there at the bottom right of the handout
The pronoun.
is the Greek relative pronoun.
Yeah.
And then the one just above it to the left is the article. If you look at the feminine nominative singular in both of those, there's only one small difference.
Oh, okay, I get it. I had to like what the. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
So there's only one small difference. And one of them has an acute accent and one does not. One of them is the article. It will mean the, essentially. And one of them means who, which, or what.
There
So
we go.
It's an important little.
I
So
know.
that's- that little tiny cute mark means a little kind of, yeah, it's a little significant.
Huh.
And there's a couple of them there. The not the
Pronounce it differently then? With the-
no, you wouldn't pronounce it any differently. In that one, it would still be hey and hey, hey and hey.
You just know because how it's used. Just
Just
like.
context. Okay, I was like,
Well, no, because of the cute mark. Well,
But I mean,
yeah.
if you weren't
But, like,
reading
if you
it,
were
if you were
speaking
actually.
it-
Yeah,
understood
yeah.
it, like,
So
that's
this
not
is,
gonna happen.
I'll and this will be one of one note that I'll bring up later. This is actually a big deal of how we may know how words were originally pronounced because of all these different things. The different, I can't think of the easy word. What people hostile to the faith would call errors in the Bible. When a scribe was copying something, they'd have what are known as scriptoriums, and you'd have one person up here, so you'd all have your piece of paper with your pen or quill, and I would be up here reading the text to you, and you'd be writing it out. And so I may say, hey, yada, 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 and you'd go, it must be the article. And that's how some of these things came about. Because until about the 2nd, 3rd century, they only had this alphabet, and until I think I want to say 5th or 6th century, they didn't have any accent marks. And they didn't use spaces. And so it'd just be one long line, and you just start writing it out. It's confusing even for people who know
I
it.
can't believe people have brains that can do this. Figure it
It's
out.
Their brains are no different than ours.
No.
No different than ours. No different. No different. It's the culture we live in. It's just a little bit different. Our culture is focused on video games and how big can I make my hamburger, which it should be big, but let's just
Is that a personal thing?
yeah. Come on, Ron. You know you want a big hamburger. You don't want none of those little McDonald's cheeseburgers. You want real quality. 4 daughters. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
Maybe have experts.
Yeah, that's what I
So,
felt.
We've gone into rabbit trail territory. Any more questions? Any more questions? Get it back on topic. Greek. Any questions before we go over the homework I'd like you to touch on, if you choose to do so. Optional. Again, optional. Homework, always optional. This is a pass-fail class. That means
But
you
there will
pass
be 7 pop quizzes.
even if you fail, and you fail even if you pass. So, any questions before we do some homework? I'll give you a little bit of homework. Okay. So, what I want you to do for homework, if you so choose to do it, is all I want you to do is write out that Greek article sheet. So this, I just want you to write it out with masculine, feminine, neuter, nominative, singular, all the way down, and all those accent marks. Just write it out, and that's it. You don't have to sound it out. Just write it out. That way, it'll get into the memory bank of being able to recognize it, especially if you write it out. And it takes about. This took me, I would say 45 seconds to write out. Okay, a minute.
45 minutes.
I was gone for 10. You were so hard noticed.
Okay, so that's all, and then go over the last page in your handout is 5 more Greek vocabulary words, and they all correspond to either John 1 through 5, or they're going to correspond. They're really big, important words in the New Testament. So the first one is the word for light, phos. It's where we get our word for photon, so lights, and that would be the genitive. And then the word for darkness, scotia, the third person pronoun, and the word for Lord, and the word for Christ. Those are 5 words that come up a lot, and 3 of them are actually in John 1 through 5. So as an addendum to the homework, so last week when I gave it to you, I told you about the genitive, and that you guys saw some genitives in the vocabulary assignment, the little vocabulary assignment I gave you. And in every entry you're going to find in a Greek dictionary. Next week I'll bring 2 different dictionaries. I'll bring my weapon, BDAG, and then I'll bring the one that's much more kind to people. So you can look at it and see some entries just right in your hands. And so every entry that's a noun is going to have this form to it. It's going to give you its nominative singular ending, whatever it's going to be. It's going to give you that, so that way you'll know what declension it is when you see it in a dictionary. So if you look at the first one, if you look at the second one, that first one's a third declension noun. We didn't cover those, so don't worry about it. If you look at your second one, you'll know that it's a first declension word because of its ending. Well, it may be a first declension word, right? No, you'll know it. You'll know it's a first. You may know. It's either. I remember these are that exist. It's either going to be a nominative singular, or it's going to be here. You know it's not here though, because it's first when it's what's called the lexical form. It's always going to be nominative singular. So you know it's in the first declension. So you know what that word's going to look like in genitive form. You will. You do.
You know. There's some of us that will know.
You will know too, Ron. You'll know, Ron, you are going to know what its genitive form is because of this. Because it's in this. It's also written right next to it. And that's why it's written there, so you know whether it's this one or this one. That's why that exists. So you know which paradigm is in. Is it in the is it in the E? Is it in the A to sandwich with A bread, or is it in the A spread or the A spread? A to spread. Yeah. That's a new one for you, Cameron. The alpha spread or the A to spread? Alpha spread, eta spread. Eta sandwich with A bread. Anyway, so you'll know the rest of the endings of Scotia because of those 2 little markers. That's why it exists. And you know that it's feminine and not masculine, because remember the first declension is feminine, but it can sometimes be masculine. And you know its gender because they always put the article at the end of it. So we know it's feminine because it has the eta article, or hey, if you wanted to pronounce it. Hey. It's a good way to remember it's feminine. Hey. What's the Greek feminine article? Hey. What's the Greek masculine article? Oh.
There we go. This is my kind of learning.
Can we make up a song for all the? Yeah.
You can.
I will.
Megan's homework for next week. Make up a song telling us how to find the Greek article. So, any questions before we move on? Any questions? Cool. So, pop quiz. What's this letter?
C.
Oh, that's the
Yes, Kofi. It's C. C. Yeah. All right. Pop quiz over.
Oh, okay. That was my green.
Kobe got the gold star again.
I don't really count.
Yes, you do. You're here, Kofi. You count.